Grind and MMOs. This is something that MMOs that Ashes is at least in part based on had a lot of. In particular, Lineage 2 and Arcade had a tremendous amount of grind. Is Ashes going to have a similar amount of grind as those games? Let's talk about it. When Lineage 2 was first released, it took 8 to 9 months before the first person hit the level cap of 75. And a lot of that leveling was just mindlessly grinding mobs. Arcade in comparison to Lineage 2 did not have nearly as much grind, but in comparison to most modern MMOs, it still had a lot of grind. And it also had a nearly unlimited gear score grind in which you could basically always grind out more gear score. A lot of old school Korean MMOs have this near infinite gear score grind as an in-game loop, but grinding is something Intrepid Studios has said will not be a part of Ashes of Creation. But to be honest, I'm fairly skeptical. Most every system they have detailed in Ashes does appear to take a long time commitment to progress to the highest tiers. Character level, for instance, hitting the max level of 50 is said to take 45 days of playing 4 to 6 hours per day. Everything they've said about the Artisan system suggests it will take a long time to progress through. And there's myriad other progression systems. I suspect many of them will be time sinks as well. Which, to be clear, I think is smart game design in the modern era. Many MMO players min-max the hell out of things. And while I am also that guy at times, I also get the other point of view. Some of the elitism that surrounds min-maxing has gotten out of hand in MMOs. To combat min-maxers speedrunning your MMO in the first week, making things take a lot more time to achieve is a way to have an MMO that doesn't have infinite content to satiate the desires of the 24/7 full-time MMO players that min-max to the extreme. But getting back to talking about grind in MMOs, having things take as long as they will take to achieve an Ashes without there being any grind, I think will be a tough task. But honestly, I don't care that much either way, because I'm one of those players that enjoys a nice grind as long as the reward at the end makes it worth it. Sometimes I do like to just lean back in my chair and mindlessly grind while watching a documentary or listening to a podcast on a second monitor. Or sometimes I like to do it the way Chad does it.
Yeah! Woo! Ah! 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 Ah!
Thanks, Chad. In a way, I hope there is some grind, but on the other hand, I've played many MMOs, particularly Korean MMOs that make everything a grind, and compelling content is few and far between, and to me that is too much. I want a decent balance. I don't mind some grind, but I also want some highly engaging content to play with my guildies as well. And of course, I really want some meaningful open world PvP, which is oh so lacking in modern MMOs, and I'm very hopeful Ashes can bring back. And of course, like everything regarding MMOs, we all probably disagree on the true definition of grinding. To me, it is just doing a highly repetitive task over and over again, killing a specific mob repeatedly for hours on end for a specific drop from that mob. That I would call a grind. And even if we might come to an agreement on the definition of grind, we might not agree at all on how much grind is acceptable. My guess is old school MMO gamers like myself are perfectly okay with some level of grind. But are modern humans actually ready to grind in an MMO? Well, MMO players are certainly built different, and we all probably have higher attention spans than the average human. Maybe not Chad, of course, but Steve certainly does. But the average human attention span has been plummeting over the years. I'm going to link a blog post in the description that has some really incredible statistics regarding human attention spans over time. The statistics surrounding human attention span are shocking to say the least. The average human has an attention span of only 8.25 seconds. That's down 4.25 seconds since the year 2000. Apparently, goldfish have a longer attention span than the average human. A person spends less than 1 minute on a web page. The average length of time someone watches a YouTube video is 2.7 minutes, which we are well past at this point, so if you are still here, you are above average. Congrats. We can debate the cause of all of this, and correlation does not equal causation, but things like TikTok and other forms of social media likely have had a part in this. But that is not important. What matters is how modern MMO developers account for this. With attention spans down 20% plus since the early days of MMOs to now, that is an added challenge for a developer that does want that old school MMO feel. And to be clear, that's what I want as well. But I also know it's going to be a challenge to pull this off in the modern era. I do think Lineage 2 style grinding in Ashes probably would be too far. but I think some grind is okay. The key, I hate to say it, is probably to introduce it slowly. Make the early game engaging and minimal grind. Get people hooked first. Then you slowly bring the grind in. MMO players, as I've said, are built different. And people from other genres that are trying Ashes as their first MMO can be converted to MMO addicts just like all of us were at one point converted. At that point, once you are hooked, you will grind just like the rest of us. And you might chastise the grind while doing so, but relish in it once you finish the grind. And you know what else you relish? Air, which is the sponsor of today's video. Air is free, and it is, in general, a pleasant thing. You breathe it in, you breathe it out. It's nice. Air. It's pretty fucking great. Thanks, Air. And as I already said, there also needs to be compelling content to do to break up the grind. And this is where I think a lot of Korean MMOs have gone the wrong direction, as often the majority of the game is grind. There were some clear exceptions in the form of games like ArcheAge and Black Desert Online, but even those games I think on paper had much less compelling content than what Ashes of Creation is proposing. From someone that has played a lot of Korean MMOs and someone that has read the Ashes of Creation wiki front to back probably at least 10 times and watched every single Ashes live stream, and I put hundreds of hours into Alpha 1 testing, I think Ashes could be absolutely loaded with compelling content. To start the granddaddy prize of large PvP groups in Ashes, the castle sieges, 500 versus 500 castle sieges in a modern engine with fantastic graphics, and a lot on the line for the winners and losers is something that no Western MMO has attempted in the last 20 years. Then you have the caravan system, which we got a glimpse of late last year. On paper, this system is a massive step up in complexity from previous systems like the trade pack system in ArcheAge. The highly customizable caravans combined with the highly complex glint system and the highly complex artisan system could make for incredibly compelling PvP every single day. And then there's an area that Ashes could really separate itself from ArcheAge: PvE and raiding. I actually think that on paper, Ashes is looking to have much better raiding content than what ArcheAge had. ArcheAge raids were often pretty brain dead in terms of mechanics, and the developers said this was because of the threat of PvP during these fights. They decided to dumb down the mechanics because of the PvP. I know it is early, but from what we have seen from the first raid boss in Ashes, Tumok, I think we might actually get difficult raid bosses in Ashes. I'm going to link the wiki page for Tumok so you can look at this, but keep in mind this is only a level 30 raid boss, not an in-game raid boss, and he has 3 phases and quite a bit of mechanics. I think this boss could be a foreshadowing of what is to come, especially when you consider that Steven has said that only a small percentage of players will be able to complete some in-game content. In addition, I've already touched on this, but the artisan system in Ashes on paper could end up being the most complex crafting system we have seen in an MMO ever. It's based on Star Wars Galaxy crafting, which was very complex, and as Intrepid tends to do, they seem to be adding even more complexity to it. And if that isn't enough, there are myriad other progression systems. Obviously nodes are a big one, but there are so many other systems in Ashes. So I think compelling content could be absolutely plentiful in Ashes. But of course there is also the chance that there are so many systems in Ashes that maybe some of the systems end up not being fully completed by launch, and maybe a lot of the systems end up not being as compelling as I'm hoping for. But I do like to think of myself as an optimist, and so far, Intrepid has not shown me that they're interested in half-baking anything. So let's hope for a good balance of compelling content and I'll call it meaningful grind. Let me know what you guys think. Do you like some grind or do you not want any grind at all? What do you view as compelling content? That's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching and I'll see you guys in the next video.